Chairman, I want to thank you and Senator Johnson for working on a bipartisan basis to put together this legislation. I'm a co-sponsor of it. I know the House has a different view in terms of how I'd like to approach it, but we got to get this one done. I mean, we just heard about the importance of it. So I thank you for both of you for working on this issue. And it's less than a month when it expires, so we've got to move quickly. I spoke in my opening statement about the appreciation we have for the men and women who you represent. We just learned from media accounts that 5 Customs and Border Protection agents were shot, 1 fatally during a vessel interdiction against suspected drug smugglers off the coast of Puerto Rico. This just happened. And our thoughts and prayers, of course, are with the family of the agent who was fatally shot and also with those agents who were wounded. But I think it's a sober reminder of the sacrifices that the individuals who you represent today here make every day, and we owe them our support. It's a dangerous time, and this is an unfortunate example of that. So with regard to the southern border, we've talked a lot about this over the months and years even. You know, how do you take a broken system and fix it? Because clearly, if you look at this chart behind me, it's broken. We have had all kinds of charts in this committee and all kinds of discussions about it. There was an interesting back and forth recently between President Biden's Chief of Border Patrol, Raul Ortiz, who works for you, as you know, Mr. Secretary, and the state of Florida. The Attorney General in Florida has a lawsuit against the department with regard to the southern border. And I just thought I'd go over that quickly. This has been the worst year of apprehensions ever, the last fiscal year. But the second worst year was last year. And so these numbers speak for themselves. More than 2 million people apprehended between the ports of entry in 2022. This summer, when the Chief of Border Patrol was questioned by the state of Florida, he gave his answers under oath. And I would ask unanimous consent to place the transcript of the Border Patrol Chief's testimony into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
Secretary, I'm going to ask you the same questions that the Chief of Border Patrol was asked to see if you agree with him. And if you could, please just give me a yes or no answer as he did. The first question, is the southern border currently in crisis, yes or no?
Ranking Member Portman, the entire hemisphere is suffering a migration crisis. We are seeing an unprecedented movement of people from country to country. It is not restricted to the southern border. We are seeing an unprecedented movement of people throughout the Western Hemisphere. And I think the case of Venezuela is the most compelling example. Yeah. With a population of between 25 and 28 million people, approximately 8 million of them have left that country. Yeah. Colombia is hosting 2.4 million Venezuelans.
I would ask you for a yes or an answer with regard to the southern border. I've been to Colombia twice in the last year, very aware of what's going on with regard to the displaced people out of Venezuela, and for that matter, Nicaragua, Cuba. But the question is all the more pressing. So what are we doing about it? Shouldn't we be changing our policies at the border to deal with it instead of having this resolved? So my question to you again, is the southern border currently in crisis, yes or no?
We are seeing a significant challenge at the southern border, as we are seeing it throughout the hemisphere.
Chief Ortiz stated yes. Just so you know, your Border Patrol Chief, he said the obvious, which is yes. Second question, would you agree that the unprecedented number of unlawful migrants are entering that an unprecedented number of unlawful migrants are entering the United States right now? Yes or no?
Ranking Member Portman, I believe that the number of encounters that we have had at the border, I think it is approximately 2.3 million this past year, is the highest on record.
Okay, so the answer is yes by Chief Ortiz, and sounds like you agree with him on that. Mr. Secretary, when President Biden took office, is it true that the number of migrants trying to unlawfully enter the United States has increased substantially? Yes or no?
It has, and there are many different factors that that contribute to that.
Okay. Well, I asked you these questions. Obviously, his answer was yes. He was candid and he gave short answers. We can't fix the problem unless we acknowledge it. We can't fix the problem unless we understand the facts.
Yes.
We can't fix the problem unless we're willing to be honest. Republicans, Democrats, everyone alike saying, we've got a crisis. And if we don't fix this crisis at the border, we'll continue to see these same results.
Ranking Member Portman, if I may, there's been a problem with our immigration system, an acknowledged one, unanimously so, for years and years. The system is
Well,
not been
for
repaired
years and
40
years, but again, look at this chart. This is the numbers. So it's gotten far worse. And look, we don't have time to go into the details as to how we fix it, but you and I have talked about this a lot, Mr. Secretary. And if the asylum system is not fixed, this won't end. If we don't give the Border Patrol more resources, this is not going to end. If we don't figure out a way to provide for deportations when people are here illegally, particularly when they're committing other crimes, this will continue. So we are, unfortunately, looking at a situation where, you mentioned Colombia, if you go to the countries throughout the hemisphere, they believe this is a pull factor, our policies. And the leadership of these countries actually don't want their people moving into the United States. That might seem counterintuitive to some people, but some of their best and brightest are leaving because of our pull factor, because we're not putting in place the right policies to be able to control our own southern border. So many other questions, and we'll get a chance the second round, I hope, to talk about some of these. With regard to the cyber attacks we talked about earlier, the agencies that have been compromised in some of these attacks concern us greatly. Yesterday, CISA and the FBI issued a joint advisory detailing suspected Iranian government-sponsored actors' compromise of the federal agencies using this Log4 shell vulnerability. I'd ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, to include that advisory in the record, so we have it as part of this record. We have discussed this vulnerability at length in this committee. Another example of the issues. My time is expiring here in a second, but can you just tell us, Secretary Mayorkas, what agencies or agency was compromised with regard to this latest announcement you made regarding the Iranian government-sponsored attack?
Ranking Member Portman, that identity has not been disclosed, and I'd need to speak with my colleagues to determine whether I would be compromising any security interest in doing so.
Are you confident that the actors have been expelled from our federal networks?
I will once again need to confer with my colleagues to determine the status of the effort by the bad actors.
We are considering, as you know, this FISMA reauthorization. This is the Federal Information Security Modernization Act to trigger cyber incident reporting to Congress. Would this be considered a major incident?
I believe so, Ranking Member Portman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.